can we talk about the timeline of episode 1 of Interview with the Vampire, because it's low-key a mess. I say a mess, it's not that much of a mess, but when I was rewatching it the other day, I noticed a few things that just didn't add up, and I was like, I kind of want to talk about them, so here we are talking about them. Let's just go through the episode first, okay? So, we begin the flashbacks of episode 1 with Louis saying it's the fall of 1910, and during this same first evening in the past, we get the scene where Paul is screeching about God, and Louis has to go out to shut him up and ends up pulling a knife out on him, okay? That's our first introduction to the past. Fall of 1910. Louis pulls out a knife. The very next scene is breakfast with the family, presumably the next morning, because Paul is explaining to Florence about how Louis pulled the knife out on him. During this same scene, Grace talks about how it's 1 month till her wedding. This is where we're getting messy, okay? Remember that. It's fall of 1910. The next day they're at breakfast. At breakfast, Grace says, "My wedding is in a month." We then see the first time Louis and Lestat meet each other, which isn't the same day as the breakfast scene because Louis is wearing a different outfit, but I would imagine it's probably like no more than a few days, like a week max later, right? Because like, why would Louis be telling us? I mean, maybe Lestat was watching Louis for a long time before he like actually introduced himself, but let's just say it was like a few days, okay? After this, we see the poker game, which is presumably Louis and Lestat's second time meeting each other, and then we're shown a few different scenes of what they got up to, which includes them sitting on their park bench, with voiceover Louis saying, "It was a cold winter that year, and Lestat was my cold fire." Now hold on a second. What do you mean by winter? I thought it was fall. And 1 month till your sister's wedding. How are we breezing through the whole of winter? How is Lestat your cold fire for the whole of winter? That doesn't make sense. Let's continue. Following this, we see Louis give Grace some tickets for her and Levy's honeymoon. And to me, it looks like the date on those tickets is February 1911. Then we have the family dinner, followed by Louis and Lestat going back to Lestat's place with Miss Lily, and then they do their biting and floating, and Louis is like, "I'm never doing that again." And that's where their relationship ends. The very next scene is Grace's wedding. And obviously, along with Grace's wedding, we have Paul jumping off the roof as the sun comes up after Grace's wedding, and then present day Louis tells us that that is the last sunrise that he saw, which means when we cut to the funeral right after this, it's the evening of the morning that Paul died, which means his funeral is on the same day that he died. Okay, did they do that in the past? I don't think that's a thing now, really, ever. But okay. After Louis freaks out about the funeral, he goes in search of Miss Lily and is told that she died 2 weeks ago. And then after this, Lestat shows up at the church and they get married at the altar. So I think there are 2 timeline options here, depending on which piece of dialogue that I just explained that you want to latch onto. We've got option 1, Grace is getting married in a month. It's the fall of 1910. Let's say it's October 1st. October 1st, Louis pulls a knife on Paul and is watched by Lestat. October 2nd, Paul complains at the breakfast table about Louis pulling out a knife, and Grace mentions that it's 1 month until her wedding day. October 3rd to October 17th, Louis and Lestat go on shopping sprees, sit at benches and get to know each other, go for a family dinner, and then end their interactions on a floaty little drink with a passed out Miss Lily on the sofa. October 18th, Lestat kills Miss Lily. November 1st, Grace gets married. Morning of November 2nd, Paul jumps off the roof. Evening of November 2nd, Louis attends Paul's funeral and ends the evening a vampire. That's kind of a crazy timeline, which I imagine is not the timeline that the episode wants you to come away with, and to be fair, I will say that is not what comes across during the episode. What comes across more is the second option, which is it was a cold winter that year. It's fall of 1910. October 1st, Louis pulls a knife on Paul and is watched by Lestat. October 2nd, Paul complains at the breakfast table about Louis pulling out a knife. Somewhere in early October, Louis and Lestat meet for the first time and bid for Miss Lily. Sometime in mid-October, Louis joins Lestat and the others for a poker game. Mid-October to March 21st, Louis and Lestat go on shopping sprees, sit on benches and get to know each other, go for a family dinner and then end their interactions on a floaty little drink with a passed out Miss Lily on the sofa. April 19th, Lestat kills Miss Lily. May 2nd, Grace gets married. died. Morning of May 3rd, Paul jumps off a roof. Evening of May 3rd, Louis attends Paul's funeral and ends the evening a vampire. I think it's pretty clear from the episode that the intention of the timeline is that Louis and Lestat spent a decent amount of time genuinely getting close to each other. They didn't have some quick whirlwind romance. Like, they did genuinely get to know each other, but there is also pretty clear there are things in the episode that contradict each other, right? Louis says it's fall 1910. Grace says she's getting married in a month. Louis says Lestat kept him company through the winter. That doesn't make sense. In terms of the dates I chose in option 2, Louis said he spent winter with Lestat, so I just made the first day of spring the cutoff for their relationship, which in 1911 was March 21st, my birthday, if you care. Also Luke Brandonfield's birthday. Oh my god, we're twins. That's crazy. Anyways, in terms of the wedding and Paul's death, I'm going by this image of the Dulac family gravestone, which I found on Google, like, because I knew it existed, but I couldn't find it in an episode anywhere. And I don't know if it's because it's not shown or if I'm just like blind and just couldn't find it. But yeah, there is a grave that has Paul's specific death date on it. And that's what I used for option 2's dates. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, to be honest. I just like, it's just a thing that I noticed and rewatching the episode, and I was like, I feel like it would be interesting to see if you actually put it in, like put the timeline in, like, okay, Grace's wedding actually is in a month, what would Louis and Lestat's relationship look like? And turns out it looks like a crazy whirlwind romance. It's what it looks like. These two options don't take into account the tickets that Louis gave Grace, which, like I said, I think say February 1911, which, if that's the case, then Grace's wedding wasn't in a month or 6 or 7 months. It was in more like 3 or 4 months, depending on when they go on the honeymoon. Like, if they could get married in a month and then go on the honeymoon in like 3 months time, but like assuming they get married then go on the honeymoon straight away, that would make the timeline a few months long, somewhere in between the 2 options that I explained already. But yeah, I don't know where this is going, really. I don't have like some big like thing to say about this. I'm just like, well, I guess I just wonder how this actually happens. Like, why would you have Grace say at the beginning of the episode that she gets married in a month, only for the episode to then be months and months of Louis and Lestat getting to know each other and end on the wedding? Because, like, surely you connect dots that you've said, I'm getting married in a month, and then the episode is like spanning a year almost. Like, I don't know how that happens. Like, no one caught that through any of the processes that happen like during making an episode. I don't know. I find that interesting that would just slip through, but like, I mean, not to be clear, not that it matters, obviously. The episode's still a banger, 10 out of 10, like, I was gonna say 10 out of 10 no notes, but I guess this is my note. I guess this is the one note I have. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Subscribe. Or don't, I don't know, whatever.